we would probably need quite a significant change in terms of how we view age and aging. So, for example, a couple of months ago, the World Health Organization released a global report on ageism, and the report actually found that ageism is pervasive across more or less all the countries surveyed. They did a survey on more than 80,000 people in 57 countries, and findings were that about 1 in 2 people seem to harbor some sort of ageist attitudes or stereotypes. So if you now just imagine that we have an aging population in terms of, having a prolonged life, and we don't reverse the aging process as such, meaning everyone more or less is running around in the body of a 30-year-old, but we are just basically prolonging the last phase of our lives, we would probably need a quite significant change in our perspective on age and the aging process and the inequalities that come with age and aging. It's a really interesting gauge for what's happening in society and how we view certain values. There's an ongoing debate about what advertising actually does. Is it shaping culture? Is it just mirroring culture? But even if we approach advertising just as a mirror of societal values, studies show that older people are still significantly underrepresented in advertising, that older people are still represented in certain ways that don't necessarily reflect a normal aging process in a realistic way. So, for example, to me, it seems at the moment the take in the advertising industry of what older people are and what they do is to represent them as kind of slightly funny yet also ridiculous. So in that sense, there's actually, I think, quite a bit to do in the advertising industry to come to a kind of proper and realistic reflection of what aging and older people are actually all about. Most definitely, and this is, I guess, where often our understanding of what ageism actually is a little bit off track. Even in public debates, we seem to link ageism predominantly to chronological age. Chronological age meaning either people who are old, 60, 70, 80, or very young people. But in the end, ageism is actually a concept that's predominantly linked to social context and to power, and then subsequently to inequality. The advertising industry itself admits in trade journals and public talks that the industry has a problem with ageism. But who's considered old in the advertising industry is someone who is approaching the late 30s, early 40s. Research shows that only about 10% of people working in the Australian advertising industry are older than 45. And similar figures are coming out of the UK and the United States. So we can see here probably not necessarily a strong cause-effect relationship, but at least a kind of correlation. Many people working in the advertising industry are young, and what we see is an underrepresentation of older people. And so we have kind of nice cycle going. The interesting thing about ageism is that it's much more, or often at least, much more subtle than other forms of discrimination like sexism or racism. It's often kind of hidden in institutional practices, in certain kinds of ideas about what the best or appropriate age is for certain kind of jobs or professions or industries. The process as such of how ageism actually works seems to be somewhat hidden from our everyday experience, or it might come across as somewhat funny, but not necessarily as this overt form of discrimination that it actually appears to be when we look at outcomes, meaning who's working, what kind of jobs, who gets access to certain kind of forms of training or career progression or something like that.